Special episode of Outdrank the Coverage is brought to you by the Frisco Bar and Grill, located at 6750 Gaylord Parkway, Suite 120 in Frisco. You can also find them online at thefriscobar.com. But hey, in person's the best. And I'll tell you why. Not only is it a bar, which is awesome in and of itself, they also have great sports nights. They have the watching club for the Oklahoma Sooners and the San Francisco 49ers. But they have multiple screens, so even if you're not a fan of those, you can always find the action that you want. And honestly, they have hockey, they have baseball, they have it all. And if you got your date night and she doesn't want to watch sports, you can take there and you can go live music, or you can check out the karaoke. They have great food. They have great drink deals. They have it all. So check out the Frisco Bar and Grill, again, located at 6750 Gaylord Parkway, Suite 120 in Frisco. And we appreciate them being title sponsor of Outdrink the Coverage. L4 Media, we talk high school football, 4A, 3A, and 2A in Texas. We talk East Texas sports. We talk NFL, guy talk, movie, and booze. We also talk wrestling and so much more. So like and subscribe and check us out. The Dallas Cowboys were called next year's champions, the team that couldn't win the big one. And no, I'm not talking about the 2022 Cowboys or the 2021 or the 2018 or 16 or 14 or even the 2007. We're going all the way back to the 1965 to 1970 Cowboys. But in 1971, they finally broke through, winning their first of 5 Super Bowl champions. And we're here to talk about it. Hello, everybody. Terry Bennett, Grant Goodwin. Terry Bennett, intern Noah here. Outdrank the Coverage. This is part of our special off-season series brought to you by the Frisco Bar and Grill. And we're going to be talking about all 5 Super Bowl champions of the Dallas Cowboys. And we thought, what better way to start? And that's to start in order. And I think that this is honestly, it's kind of the most interesting of the 5 Super Bowl champions, because it's the one that it's kind of out on its own. And I know they only won one more in the 70s, but that 70s team, that's the iconic Cowboys. That's the America's team's Cowboys. That's the Cowboys when you think of the 70s. Honestly, I think almost all of us think of, Roger Staubach, of course, but Tony Dorsett, Drew Pearson, Ed Too Tall Jones, Randy White, Charlie Waters, all that group. And none of them except for Charlie Waters was on this 71 Cowboy team. In fact, I think there was 5 players that went from the 71 and the 77 Super Bowl champs. So I've always thought that this was a very interesting team to talk about. And then doing this deep dive, it only proves it. This is one of the most interesting Super Bowl teams that there is in the NFL.
Yeah, 71 and 77 are a big contrast.
Yeah.
With the 71 Cowboys, it was a mixture of a lot of good draft picks that finally paid off in the mid 60s, plus some key free agents they got in 70 and 71.
Yeah.
Mike Ditka, Lance Allworth, Hall of Famers.
Yes. But Hall of Famers that had careers everywhere else and finished in Dallas.
A lot of people think of Mike Ditka. They think of him as the head football coach for the Bears and to a lesser extent the Saints. But he was a Hall of Famer because of his time as a tight end for the Bears.
Yep.
And the Eagles.
Yeah.
He was one of the premier tight ends at a time. It was just him and John Mackey basically were the best tight ends around this time in the 60s. And he was actually still pretty relevant for the Cowboys in 71. He was very much needed. So was Lance Allworth was putting up video game numbers in the 60s for the San Diego Chargers.
Yes.
Video game numbers today. I mean, he was getting 1,300, 1,500 yards. The Eric Coryell offense for the Chargers in the AFL days. And he was still also a very needed piece because Bob Hayes had no one else.
Yeah.
I mean, they had Lance Rensel. Lance Rensel. That was the guy I was thinking about in our previous conversation before the podcast. So they needed a number 2 receiver, and kind of like what the 2023 Cowboys are looking for right now, which they kind of got with Brandon Cooks.
Yes.
But yeah, they got Lance Allworth. They also had Dan Reeves as well. Some of the key like sort of like, I mean, Dan Reeves was a minor piece, but like Lance Allworth and Dick were kind of those missing pieces that the 71 team needed to get over the top.
Yeah, and so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the 71 season overall, talk about just where the NFL was, because I think this is an interesting year. As I did a reel for this to promote it earlier, and as I talked about, and you and I have had this conversation before, there's certain years where that's the line in the sand of transition for the NFL.
Yeah.
And the 71 season is definitely one of those, what you would call a transition year. And the reason why, and we'll just go ahead and start right now, the fact that this is a year that out of 26 teams between the beginning of the 71 offseason through the 71 year, there were 13 NFL head coaching changes.
Wow.
3 of them in season, 10 of them outside of the regular season. Some of them were a little weird, like Washington was weird because Vince Lombardi, right at the beginning of the 70 season, got diagnosed with cancer. He passed away. And then the offensive line coach Bill Austin kind of just served as an interim, and he was never going to stay on. They get George Allen, of course, who the Over the Hill gang. I'll admit this. I never realized until studying George Allen cheated a lot. Like he did a lot of really like trading one draft pick or making the same trade 3 different times so he could pick up different players. And I didn't even realize he did that when he was a Ram coach too. So it's really weird. George Allen, he's a really interesting guy, but people like him, he becomes the head coach of Washington, and for from 71 through 75, they're one of the better teams in the NFL. You've got the Rams as he left them. Tommy Prothro came on, and Prothro struggled with them, but he started laying the foundation for those Ram teams of the late 70s that would become such a thorn in the side of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
And so the 71 season, it's just really, really interesting how much change there was. So let's just go ahead and start. And so what we're going to do is the first part of the show, we're just going to talk about the 71 season, who were the teams and all that. And then we'll start to transition into more about the Dallas Cowboys, the Super Bowl champs. But we'll go ahead and start with the year before, of course. Dallas lost to the Baltimore Colts in the Super Bowl. I think, when you think of Super Bowl upsets, you think of the Giants beating the Patriots, more the first time, but you can say both of them. Of course, the most famous one is the Jets beating the Baltimore Colts. But I honestly think that the Baltimore Colts beating Dallas in the 1971 Super Bowl 70 season, I think that's right up there as one of the bigger upsets because Dallas was the better team.
And the Colts were going in with a new head coach. They had just fired Don Shula after the 69 season. So Dick McPherson, I think it's his name, Dick McPherson. Or Don McCafferty.
Yeah,
sorry.
let's say
Dick McPherson was a Syracuse head coach.
Yes.
So Don McCafferty was leading a very veteran-laden team. They were still good, but they were getting old. So the 70 Colts were much different than the 75 to 77 that you kind of know with Burt Jones.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were on the last legs, kind of like the 79 Steelers, 95 Cowboys. If they were going to do it, it was going to be this year or next year. So that 70 Colts team, they kind of just made it through the season. They had the talent. They had, Johnny Unitas still had something left in them. They had a Hall of Fame tight end in Mackey. They still had pieces, Billy Ray Smith and all of them. But they were still, if you watch the Super Bowl, they were really still no match for the Cowboys. The Cowboys went in that season with a hot Craig Morton, a rookie Dwayne Thomas who had a great year, and Bob Hayes. I mean, he could get 30 catches for this season, but he still have over 800 yards.
Yeah, that's just absolutely crazy to think about that.
Yeah, and the offensive line was one of the best in the league. Ray Wright and them. Defensive line, Bob Lilly. They had Chuck Howley. Yeah, it's still to this day, there's only been one Super Bowl MVP on a losing team, and it was Chuck Howley in the 1970 season for the Cowboys.
Yeah, and again, I think, when you look back at the Cowboys 65 to 70, and when we get to the Cowboy part of this season, we'll talk more about it. but they kind of become known as next year's champs, can't win the big one. I think that the first 2 losses to Green Bay, you kind of go, okay, you can see that Green Bay is an amazing team. They went to Super Bowls. The trophy's named after their head coach. But it was the next 3 years, losing to Cleveland back-to-back years in the playoffs, and then that Baltimore game where, Dallas it was an ugly game.
Yeah.
First off, Dallas, when you look at 3 of the wins for Dallas, or 3 of the Super Bowls that Dallas win, 2 of them being wins, turnover is a big part.
Mm-hmm.
This one, the one against Denver, and then the first one against Buffalo.
What was the nickname of the Super Bowl? Super Bowl 5.
Yep, Super Bowl Follies, Super Bowl, yeah.
There was plenty. Blunder Bowl is the one I always remember.
Yep.
But yeah, there was plenty of different nicknames.
Yeah, it's funny because people forget that game came down to basically a last kick in the last 15 seconds.
Yeah,
but nobody thinks about that though, because the game was just really ugly.
Yeah.
So going into the 71 season, it feels like, looking back now and talking with my dad, who was a big Cowboy fan and old enough to remember, he basically was like, yeah, you just kind of realize that they're just not going to win it.
Mm-hmm.
They're good, but they're not great. And so going into the 71 season, I legitimately think that this might have been the one time in Landry's career before the end where he might have been coaching for his job in 71.
Hey, honestly, if Landry was transplanted into today's NFL, he'd have been fired after year 2 or 3.
Well, yeah, because it's just a different.
Yeah, like for a lot of people that don't really know about the early Cowboys, 60 to 64, they were not that good at all.
No,
I know some of the early stars were Ada LeBaron, the short quarterback.
Yep.
But the Cowboys were not really good. They had Bob Lilly, but they weren't really that good until 65 when they got to 500. And then after that, they started showing, oh, okay, we actually have some talent. You look at the 70-71 team. You look at that, just the defense alone, just 11 stout players, like 11 well-known players. If you pay attention to anything in football, that's just, and we'll talk about it. There's a lot of guys there that are not in the Hall of Fame that probably should be.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were building that team. I could definitely have seen Tex Stram firing Landry at some point, especially after one of the Brown playoff losses.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you had the 2 close games against Green Bay, and then you're like, okay, again, those are great teams, but they're starting to get old. So here's our window.
Yeah, and
then you can't even get past Cleveland, who was a good franchise, but Cleveland was, they weren't great.
Correct.
And so you're really good point. I think maybe getting to that 70 Super Bowl, even though they lost, at least I think that quelled some of the questions. But I really do. I feel like if Dallas wouldn't have won the Super Bowl in 71, Landry legitimately might not have been there.
Yeah, and to backtrack a little bit, the Packers, they were really strong in the first half of the 60s. They were strong up until 68.
Yeah.
They were definitely getting old by that last 67 season when they won their second Super Bowl. But and then Vince Lombardi retiring also kind of put them on a trajectory to where they would not be that competitive until the early 90s.
Yeah.
The Brown teams, they had won the NFL championship in, 63, 64. I think it was Jim Brown's one and only championship as a Brown. He might have won more in the 50s with the Otto Graham, but I don't even think him and Otto Graham played on the same team. I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken there, but yeah, Browns and Bears won NFL championships in the early 60s.
Yeah.
Instead of the Packers. Packers won 61, 62, then 63, 64, Bears, Browns, and then 65, 66, 67, 3 in a row. And that Packer team, and then the Browns, after Blaine Collier, he was the head coach for that time period. Their main big player, which you'll see on the Dolphins, Paul Warfield.
Yep.
Stout wide receiver for them. So they were still competitive, but there was, like with many teams in this time, there was a ceiling. They were. You look at them like, yeah, they're playoff bound, but they're not Super Bowl bound.
Yeah.
And it kind of showed, even though. Okay, this is where I was trying to get back to. 68, 69 season for the Cowboys, coming off the Ice Bowl loss in 67 to the Packers. You could see them as you said in the beginning of this podcast, next year's champions. And then they don't just lose close to the Browns.
Yeah, good point.
Both years. It's blowout losses. And I could definitely, in today's NFL, Landry would have been fired.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%.
I have no idea why maybe Landry is playing or coaching at a discount, like Tex Stram was doing to the other players in the team, like Bob Lilly and all them.
Well, but I also think it just helped that was still Dallas was a startup club when Landry was there, so he wasn't coaching against ghost of Cowboys past or anything.
Yeah,
every time they went a little further in the playoffs. That was a new new achievement for them.
I guess you have to think about it where Landry came from, because he was on the Giant teams of the 50s.
Yep,
as I believe defensive coordinator.
Well, when he was coaching, he was the defensive coordinator. Vince Lombardi was the offense coordinator.
Yeah, so you see Vince Lombardi in 59 going to the Packers, and they automatically become a winning team.
Yeah.
The following year, they make it to the NFL title game, lose to the Eagles, and then they go on their 5 NFL title run in the 60s. So, I mean, it's so easy to just compare the Packers to the Cowboys.
But again, the Packers had a history. Cowboy wasn't. I think what really saved Landry was the Cowboys were a startup club in '60, so they had no history to have to. I mean, he was basically giving a blank slate. So anything that was new. But talking about Cleveland, I want to go back to that. Let's remember that there was a big change between when Dallas had last lost to Cleveland in 1969 to 1971, and that's that Cleveland was now in the AFC.
Correct.
We had finally in 1970 we had went to the true what we have now NFC AFC. Dallas and San Francisco played in the very first true NFC championship game. Dallas won. You want to talk about? It's funny. You and I said this before. Dallas's and San Francisco's playoff history outside of 1981 goes in threes. So you have to wonder if that's going to matter this year, because in the early 70s, it was 70, 71, and 72. Dallas won all three. And then San Francisco wins in 81. And then, of course, 92, 93, 94. And now we're in the possible third year. We've got 2021 and 2022.
Yep.
But let's go ahead and look right now at the full of the season. All right. So let's talk about we'll start over in the NFC, but we'll start in the other division. In the NFC West. Or no, you know what? Let's actually go up to the all the awards. The MVP of the league. This is how you can tell the NFL is different now. The MVP of the league is Alan Page, Hall of Fame defensive lineman for the Minnesota Vikings and also Chicago, but mainly known for being being a Minnesota part of the Purple People Eater.
Yep.
He was the player of the year. This is funny. The offensive rookie of the year, John Brockington. The defensive rookie of the year, Isaiah Robertson. Okay, I remember the names.
Okay.
I mean, I remember the names, but neither one of them had Hall of Fame careers.
He just recently passed John Brockington.
Yes. You had the leading quarterback, again, go back to era. And this seems like a lot for back then, though. John Hadle had 3,075 yards.
Yep.
The rushing leader was Floyd Little for 1,133 yards. Again, only 14 games. Yes. Yeah. And then Otis Taylor led the league in receiving with 1,011. He finished his career, by the way, with 7,306 yards. You look at that now, and an average wide receiver in 7 years will have that. So in the NFC, the standings went. Minnesota won the Central with 11-3 record. Detroit was 7-6-1. Chicago 6-8. Green Bay 4-8-2. I love that. In the NFC West, San Francisco won the division 9-5. The Rams were 8-5-1. So literally a tie decided that. The Falcons were 7-6-1, and then the Saints 4-8-2. Over in the AFC, Miami won the AFC East at 10-3-1. Baltimore was 10-4. New England 6-8. New York Jets 6-8. Buffalo 1-13. Which is what helped them get O.J. Simpson. Cleveland Browns 9-5. Pittsburgh Steelers 6-8. Now, again, That's the beginning, though. Pittsburgh Steelers this year are 6-8. Next year, they explode onto the scene. They win. They go to their first playoff in like 20 years.
Yep.
The Houston Oilers 4-9-1. The Bengals 4-10. And then in the AFC West, you had the Chiefs 10-3-1. Oakland 8-4. 8-4-2. Man, there's a lot of ties back in the day. San Diego 6-8 and Denver 4-9-1. And then, of course, over in the NFC East, Dallas 11-3. Washington 9-4-1. Again, there's a tie. Philadelphia 6-7. St. Louis 4-9, and then the Giants were 4-10. So when you look at the league, it's pretty spread out pretty well. You have two 10-win teams in the East of the AFC. You have no 10-win teams in the AFC Central. You have one 10-win team in the AFC West. Then over in the NFC, you have Dallas with 11 wins and Minnesota with 11 wins. They both tied with the most wins. But then you have Washington right there, 9-4-1. And you look at that Washington team, and for most of the year, Noe, they were the best team in the NFL, at least on the NFC side.
Yeah, they. I think they started 6-1 in 71.
Yes,
and that was George Allen's first year with Washington. The probably following year, their running back Larry Brown ended up being the NFL MVP.
Yeah, and
on the way to the Super Bowl.
And in this year, he had 948 yards and 4 touchdowns. They were led by Billy Kilmer and Sonny Jurgensen. Billy Kilmer started most of the year. He went 8-4-1, 2,200 yards through the air, 13 touchdowns, but 13 interceptions. And I'll go ahead and say this right now. You and I know this, but if you're new to the NFL and you only really know this era, this is the most efficient era that we're playing in right now of quarterbacks. Back in the old school, and this is why I love Jameis Winston so much, it was not unique to have a quarterback on a really good team have like 18 touchdowns and 17 interceptions.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, heck, you can even go back to the Cowboys last Super Bowl. Troy Aikman had 13 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. So if you cannot, there's certain things you look through the lens of today. The old school passing game, you cannot look through the lens of the day, because just like we're talking about, like with, Tom Landry would have been fired. Quarterbacks that won championships back then, if they played like that in this era, they would not even be on a roster.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about it. The best quarterbacks like Len Dawson and Bart Starr were having those type of stats where they were throwing 55%. 16 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. If those are the best quarterbacks of that era, think about what the mediocre to bad quarterbacks are doing.
That's a good point. And honestly, that's part of what made Tom Landry's system so good. Yeah. And part of what made Roger Staubach so good. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a guy that threw a lot of interceptions, and he was very efficient. And they always say that the passer efficiency model and how they do it, like it was Roger Staubach that it was built off of.
Roger Staubach kind of got a late start at this. He's served his country during the Vietnam War in the 60s, and then he really wasn't a Cowboy until 27.
Yeah,
and then he kind of rode the bench until 70. So 70 and 71 are kind of similar. I remember telling you about this. In 70, Staubach was the one that was kind of struggling as a starter, and Tom Landry
threw a lot of interceptions.
And then Tom Landry felt more confident in Craig Morton, and Craig Morton got the hot hand, and he kind of propelled the Cowboys to get in the playoffs and to get to the Super Bowl eventually. So going to 71, you felt more comfortable with Craig Morton. I think he started the opening game against the Bills. It was a high-scoring affair. I think it was like 49-37. I might be off a little bit there, but that was his one win for 71.
Yeah.
And Tom Landry decided, during the season to just alternate quarterbacks each game. So week one, Craig Morton started. Week 2, it'd be Roger Staubach, and they would just keep going back and forth.
And we'll get into that here in a minute. But I want to go back to what you're just talking about. So you look at the 70 season, and Craig Morton now he only completed 49% of his passes, but he threw for 15 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Yeah. You look at what Roger Staubach did as far as efficient. Now, I'm not talking about stats like yards and stuff,
right?
But you look at that 1971 Roger Staubach, and he might have had up to that point the most efficient season a quarterback had at that point. 10-0, threw for 1,800 yards, completed almost 60% of his passes.
Unheard of.
Yeah, unheard of back then. 15 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions. And that's, I mean, even for him, that's truly amazing, because you look at some of his other years, as great as he was, he's still like in 76, 14 touchdowns, 11 interceptions.
Yeah.
In 78, 25 touchdowns and 16 interceptions. So that 71 year, and as much as we can say, well, it's Roger Staubach, you also have got to give credit to what the Dallas Cowboys and Tom Landry's offense was, because he was very big on screens, checking down to the to running backs. Again, something that just wasn't considered that big of a thing back then.
Yeah.
And you kind of had alluded to it when we first began talking about Calvin Hill and Dan Reeves and Walt Garrison. You look at their leading receivers. And, of course, Bob Hayes was the leading guy. He had 840 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Lance Allworth, 467. But then you've got Walt Garrison with 396. Calvin Hill with 254. You had 2 tight ends. As much as we talk about Mike Ditka, Billy Truax, combined, they had almost 600 yards together and 5 touchdowns. And so, and it's not like that Landry was the first, but he had figured out how to get the ball efficiently down the field. And instead of always throwing it 20 yards downfield, throw it 5 yards and let your running back or your tight end get you the next 10 to 15 yards.
You know, it's kind of funny because like in the late 60s, the Bengals kind of were forced to do this. I don't know if you remember Bill Walsh was their, I can't remember if there was, who's an offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, but their starting quarterback got hurt. They decided to start the backup, who didn't have the arm strength of a typical quarterback in the 60s, but he was very accurate.
Yeah.
So he kind of changed the offense to where it was more short passes, high percentage. But hey, if we'll just treat it like a running play.
Yeah.
If we can get 3-4 yards off of this play, fantastic. Let's go on the next play.
Yes.
So it's kind of what created the high percentage, low yardage era. And that kind of worked for the Bengals in that period of time. But as we all know, now in 2023, that kind of morphed into the West Coast offense, even though it originated in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
But it got popularized in the 49ers in the 80s. But yeah, you could see some wrinkles of it in the 70s with the Cowboys, especially like with Walt Garrison.
Yeah.
Obviously not with Bob Hayes because he's a speedster, but you can see it with just like Lance Allworth. At this point in time, Lance Allworth was not this all-pro stud that he was in the 60s with the Chargers.
Well, no, but and even when he was a Charger, though, Lance Allworth he wasn't Bob Hayes. He wasn't a burner.
Right.
In fact, his nickname was Bambi.
Yes.
He was known because he had thin legs, not small legs, thin legs. But what he was known for, I guess the best way to describe him, if you know history of football, he was like a little bit more athletic Fred Bilenkoff. Like Lance Allworth knew to find the spots. He knew to find where the holes were. And you got to remember, teams, because of Bob Hayes, were starting to do zones. Literally, Bob Hayes, basically his speed created what we consider the zone defense now. Yeah. And so getting Lance Allworth, who knew how to run routes with precision, who knew how to find those spots, it always amazes me, because you think of Lance Allworth like he had more of an impact, and he had an impact, but when you actually go back and look at it, it wasn't like he had 700 yards or anything. He had 487 and only 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
But that's all you needed. You had him with 34 catches, Bob Hayes with 35, again, Walt Garrison with 40, Mike Ditka with 30. And that right there, it doesn't sound like a lot, but you got to remember, A, we're only talking 14 games.
Yeah.
And B, we're talking about a year or an era where, you weren't throwing the ball 30 times unless you just were behind and that's all you could do. You were throwing it 15 times and you'd be happy with that.
Yeah. I mean, hey, everything you're saying is very true. I think with the Cowboys at this point in time, though, they really, the Cowboys threw for over 3,000 yards this particular season. But with the addition of Dwayne Thomas from the prior year, to go along with Calvin Hill, to go along with Walt Garrison, if Walt Garrison was the main back, he would have had 1,000 yards every year.
Oh yeah,
he's a great running back.
About that.
He was just a great team player.
And he's listed as a fullback.
I'm sorry that was boring you, sir.
Oh no, it's the outdrink the coverage part of the show.
Oh, whoa.
What?
This is outdrank the coverage, right?
Yeah.
Terry,
What?
how are you? And what are you
I don't know if we
drinking?
do these on these special ones, but I am definitely in the old school Southwest Conference Cup. Now, this is the old school. Like, this has the old 90s or 80s TCU logo.
That is beautiful.
I am drinking just good old vodka. What about you, sir?
I am making another attempt to make you like whiskey.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, the one you gave me this time was actually really good. I really like that. I could drink that again, definitely.
So today I'm doing a mix, but just cherry Coke. But I got, it's an Irish whiskey called Green Spot. I'll post it on the
intraweb.
On the intrawebs.
All right.
But yeah, it tastes and smells like green apple.
Yeah, it really does. Like I told you, it tasted a lot like a now and later. So let's go back to the Cowboys. Oh, hang on. Sorry. Talking about the pass attempts. So this is the pass attempts. Now, I'm only going to talk about the ones that Roger Staubach fully started.
Okay.
This is his pass attempt numbers. Attempts, not completion or anything.
Okay.
21, 31, 28, 21, 14, 15, 14, and 16. Think about today's NFL. Wow. And these are all wins. Again, Roger Staubach went undefeated that year. Yeah. I still think it one of the most underrated, just pure seasons a quarterback has had. But in the playoffs, 14, 18, and 19. Like, you're an old school guy.
Yeah.
If Dallas was winning, if in 2023 Dallas is winning and Dak Prescott is averaging 16 passes a game, you're going to be in heaven. Like, that's going to be the greatest season you've ever seen as a Cowboy.
Hey. As recent as the 2019 NFC title game, there was a quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, who had, what was it, 8 completions in that title game against the Packers. But I mean, they steamrolled the Packers because the Packers couldn't stop the 49er running game. So Garoppolo was really good at handing the ball off to Mostert and handing the ball off to another running back.
But think about that. We just were talking about how, this is one of the most underrated seasons a quarterback has had.
Yeah.
Yet he threw the ball 30 times one time.
Yeah.
And he threw 28 the very next time. But it goes to what we talk about, efficiency. The 2 games that he threw 31 and 28, he completed 64%, which is good.
Fantastic. And 50%. Fantastic for 71.
Yeah, and 50%. But when he was only throwing the ball, 14, 15 times, his completions were 66, 71, 62, 61, 70.
Yeah.
So even, that's one thing you can say about it. And we'll talk a little bit about Landry here in a minute, because we're going to talk about, Roger Staubach was not the only quarterback in the room. And I think the funny thing is when you look at some of the great players for the Cowboys, the 2 I'm thinking mainly is Roger Staubach and Tony Dorsett.
Yeah.
They did things that just drove Tom Landry crazy, because Tom Landry did not like freewheeling. He didn't like, what do you call that? Doing your own thing when a play breaks down. That, like, something he just hated.
Well, think about Landry's age at this time. Think about his upbringing.
I don't think that's age. I think that's just how he was. He was very much, you do it my way or you don't. I think if he'd have been 20 years old as the head coach, he is a believer, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, but he was definitely a believer in it's my system. And this is one of the knocks on Landry. He never understood the emotional side of football. So he never understood that when a play breaks down, you've got to improvise. That's just not what you do. I remember Tony Dorsett talking about they were practicing for the St. Louis Cardinal game. And this is one of his more famous runs where he basically breaks in, realizes the play is going to be broke out, and he bounces it outside. So he did that in practice. And Landry just berates him. And we'll talk about this again on the 77 one, because it's in that same year, and berates him like, that will never happen. If you do this, they're going to do this. And that's just how it works. And then in the game, it broke exactly how Tony Dorsett thought it would. Not that he was smarter than Landry, but Landry just never could grasp that freewheeling improvisation. And I think that's what hurt. That's one of the big knocks on Landry as a head coach. Because let's be honest, Dallas won 2 Super Bowls, but Dallas lost more games they should have won in that era than one that they should have lost. Dallas pulled a bunch of games out at the end. And so you get that Roger comeback, Captain America. But on the grand scale of things, there's no real big game in the 70s where you go, man, Dallas upset that team.
Yeah.
They came back and beat them, but like they didn't upset anybody. Their Super Bowl wins were teams they should have beat.
Dude, I mean, you look at that. I'll give the 71 team as an example.
Mm-hmm.
You look at that team, like where's the weakness? You have one of the best secondaries in all of football.
3 in the Hall of Fame now.
Yeah, Herb Adderley, who came from the Packers of the 60s dynasty.
And he was that perfect. Him and Mike Dick. Now, that's one thing Landry did realize. His team needed leadership and needed a little bit more guts, toughening.
Yeah.
And Bob Lilly even admits that. He said you get to that point where you're losing, you just start to realize you're going to lose no matter when it's a big game, you're probably going to lose. He needed that Herb Adderley type to step in and have that leadership.
Yeah.
And he still had a great year.
Oh, fantastic. Like 6 interceptions, I think.
Mel Renfro, again, one of the most underrated Hall of Famers. Nobody talks about that. Mel Renfro was Deion Sanders without the flash. I mean, Mel Renfro's on one side of the field. He shut down the defense. You didn't throw at him.
You know, like if you look at just their defense alone, I mean, they had, just start with the secondary. They had Cornell Green.
Mm-hmm.
That's before Charlie Waters became the full-time.
Yeah, I think that was, in fact, that might have been his rookie year.
Yeah, I think Charlie Waters was more of a cornerback at the time.
Yeah, and there's a great story. I don't know if it was 71, but there's a great story on the 77 team, America's game, or America's game. I was going to say America's team, where he talks about like he just got absolutely torched when he was playing corner.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't fast enough. And it's funny because that's kind of Landry's career as a pro football player.
Yeah.
Landry ended up as a safety, but started as a corner, but he had no speed. But yeah, this was right when Charlie Waters was there, but he wasn't Charlie Waters.
Yeah. Herb Adderley, Renfro, Cliff Harris, Hall of Famer.
But you love that defensive line. I know you. Hey,
dude. And I think this applies to today's NFL. If you want a competitive team, you got to build from I always compare a good NFL team to a house. A great house has a great foundation, a great base. To me, the equivalent of a base in NFL is the offensive and defensive line.
Oh, yeah, still to this day.
Yeah, you got to build it from the line out. I would always invest heavily on that because a great defensive line can mask, like take the recent examples, the 2017 Eagles. A great defensive line can mask inefficiencies in linebacker and safeties. And linebacker and safety, which they did have major deficiencies. You build a great line, and the great line, a lot of people talk about Bob Lilly, Mr. Cowboy.
Yeah.
Jethro Pugh, very, very fantastic player, another guy. So, like, their tackles were stout, and I love great defensive tackles because they really get in the quarterback's face.
Well, especially in Landry's. Now, this wasn't quite the flex defense, and we'll talk more about that as we get into these Cowboys teams. The flex defense was revolutionary until everybody figured it out. But so if you don't know, Landry basically created the 4-3 defense.
Yeah.
And then he basically created the offense to beat the 4-3 defense. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what makes this Super Bowl so interesting is Don Shula's, he's not considered the father of the 3-4, but he was very big. He was one of the first early adapters of using the 3-4. But Landry created the 4-3, and he created it as a giant defense coordinator because he was trying to protect Sam Huff.
Yeah.
And he's really the first guy that, as a defensive coordinator, said, okay, our defensive line, if you make a tackle, great, but your main job is to fill the gaps, protect your linebackers, let your linebackers run free to the ball.
Like the 2000 Ravens.
Yeah, 2000 Ravens, exactly. People forget that when they tried to go to the 3-4, Ray Lewis about quit because he stopped.
Tony Saragusa and Sam Adams clogging up everybody. Yeah.
But with this Cowboy team and the Cowboy teams of the 70s, whether it was this defensive line or the one that we all think of as, Ed Tuttle Jones, Randy White, Harvey Martin, Larry Cole, and that group, this defensive line in of itself was very active. And like you said, not just Bob Lilly, but then add in Leroy Jordan and Chuck Howley.
Yeah.
How did teams score against this defense? I mean, when you look at how good and we'll talk about that in this playoff run because teams didn't score.
Yeah.
As much as we talk about Roger Staubach and Lance Allworth and Dwayne Thomas and his weird year there, at the end of the day, it was this defense. It was the defense, and this is the beginning and the first, Doomsday Defense.
Yeah.
And again, I know we're Cowboy fans, and so a lot of what we say can turn out to be a little bit hyperbolic.
I understand that.
But this defense is one of the top 10 defenses of all time.
Yeah.
Just in players. And look at now with Chuck Howley now making the Hall of Fame.
Finally.
Look how many Hall of Famers are on it. This 71 defense, I think they still could have won it if Roger Staubach had not ever started a game. It would have been uglier, but this defense was humming at this time.
Oh, yeah. The Cowboys defense was lights out. Just to even finish off, Larry Cole and George Autry at defensive ends. There was no flaw. Chuck Howley, the prior year Super Bowl MVP, Leroy Jordan, like you said, Edwards, the linebacker. So, I mean, it was 11 at least Pro Bowlers on one defense.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into it now. Let's start talking about that actual 71 season for the Dallas Cowboys. Going into the season, as we talked about, losses in 2 straight NFL title games. Again, that was before the NFC, AFC. It was NFL versus AFL.
Yeah.
Then losing to Cleveland back-to-back years, then losing to the Super Bowl. I'm sorry, losing in the Super Bowl to Baltimore. And Bob Lilly, I mean, he says it best about where the Cowboys were at that time.
1965 was the first year that we broke out of the losing column. We were picked, I think, to win the Eastern Division. We ended up 7-7, which was a pretty good step for us.
And then Roger Staubach.
It was still Dallas could not win the big game type mentality. So even though we had taken a step closer, it still was. We still had that tag of Dallas can't win the big game.
And so they come into this season, they can't win the big game, and then the season starts. And let's just start from the beginning. We'll go game by game. We're not going to talk about like every game, but we're going to talk about the key ones. They start the year off by destroying Philadelphia. Philadelphia is not really good. Then they lose to Washington, and they lose 20-16. And I think this is what starts the Tom Landry couldn't make a decision because offensively, Dallas kind of, they struggled in this game. They scored 9 in the second quarter, 7 in the fourth. Washington scored 7, 3, and 3. Again, holding Washington to 20 points, yet your offense, which is a really good offense, could only score 16. I think that started laying the foundation for the struggle. And then Monday, so go ahead and go back. So Clint starts that game. So then Landry says, okay, game 3, we're going to start Roger Staubach. This is a Monday Night Football game. At the end of the first half, Dallas is up 13-6. I mean, that sounds good. And for whatever reason, never explained, but for whatever reason, Landry sits Staubach in that second half. Now, they end up winning the game. They only score one more touchdown, but they end up winning the game. But this is what Staubach had to say about that.
So now I'm thinking, hey, he hasn't been shooting straight with me. That here we are winning a game, and to be taken out. It couldn't have been anything worse in my mind. That was a horrible moment for me. I mean, I've never felt so bad. The team.
So think about that. At that point, he could have lost the team. Yeah. Like that could have easily, he could have lost Roger Staubach, and Roger Staubach has been a little bit more at times. This again, you have to remember, you and I joked about this when we were watching this America's team or America's game. Lilly and Staubach are really, really careful not to criticize Landry. I mean, they still think of him, and of course, these were when were these filmed? About 15 years ago. When they came?
06, 07.
06, 07 is when they first started. But even then, they were still. And even to this day, they rarely want to criticize him. But if you go find some older Roger Staubach, like in some books and other video, he's a little bit more like, this really hurt me. And I could see why. Again, this is where, and Lilly talks about it. And if you haven't ever watched it, you can find it on YouTube, 1971, America's Game, Dallas. And they talk about the fact that was, again, Landry's big weakness is he just, and this continues. Yeah. This continues all the way through when it was in 1984 with Danny White and Steve Pelleur.
Yeah.
For some reason, the one thing, one of his 2 biggest weaknesses were he didn't understand the emotional side of football. And the second one was he could never decide on a quarterback unless that quarterback just absolutely forced him to, like Staubach did.
I kind of wonder if it was Staubach's style that kind of perturbs.
It was, I think, 100%. 100%.
Because, Staubach was kind of, him and Tarkenton were kind of unique quarterbacks around this time where they were more of a running quarterback. Now, Staubach ended up becoming more of a great combo, like Steve Young is a great example of this, where he's just great at throwing the ball and also great at getting you. So he could get you 3,000 yards passing, but he can also get you 300 yards rushing. So he was more of as he got more comfortable in the offense, he became more of a situational runner. It was 3rd and 4. Took 2 seconds, scan the field, saw nothing. He would just dart 5 yards, get the first down.
Well, also I agree with you 100% on the, being him and Tarkenton, but Staubach was a rusher in a different way. He wasn't a rusher to run down the field. Like, the most yards he had in his career as a running back or as a running quarterback is actually this year, 343. Mm-hmm. His was more of scramble to stay open.
Yeah.
And targeting too as well. But yeah, I think that's 100% what it is. Again, we talk about it. Landry didn't like deviations in his plan. If he drew the play up, he wanted that play to be exactly the way it should. And if you've never seen the movie North Dallas 40, it's basically kind of it's the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in there where the head coach is basically saying this play, this is not what you do on the play. And Nick Nolte is the wide receiver. And he's saying, yeah, but it worked. And he's like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. That's not how I drew it up. And let's be fair. That's the ego of a coach.
Yeah.
Landry would almost at times rather the play fail as long as it went the way he said it would, than Roger Staubach pulling it down and scrambling, or Tony Dorsett breaking out and reversing his field.
I'll never understand that concept. Why is that ego so bad to where you can't want to win?
No, we're going to be talking about egos in the 90s with Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. So just get prepared to understand that. But you
would rather lose doing it your way than win getting help doing it someone else's way. It just boggles my mind. But anyway, going Landry. I still feel the trust also. The lack of trust goes also back to the prior season where the roles were kind of reversed, where the Cowboys were playing better with Craig Morton and Roger Staubach. I think he played sparingly, but he had like 2 touchdowns. I think 8 interceptions. Yeah, 8 interceptions. So I can still see Landry still not having that full trust in Roger Staubach.
Well, and let's be fair, Craig Morton, and again, Craig Morton is one of those that he is imprinted on Cowboys history more than people realize. Mm-hmm. But Craig Morton was a really solid quarterback. Craig Morton was not a bad quarterback. Mm-hmm. Like you talked about, in 1970, he threw for 15 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. In 69, he threw for 21 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. But I'm going to say this. There's a theme in Dallas Cowboy quarterbacks outside of 2 of them, Roger Staubach and Troy Aikman. The other ones are always really, really good, but they don't tend to shine the best in the big games. And that was Craig Morton's issue. Fair or not, he just, at the end of the day, when it came to like the playoffs and things like that, like his playoff record, he threw 9 touchdowns and 16 interceptions.
Ouch.
And that's not just counting Dallas, that's counting Denver too. And remember, we'll talk about that later. He leads Denver to a Super Bowl. You gotta feel bad for him. He gets to another team. He goes through the Giants, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
He ends up on Denver. They have a really good defense. They have a really good. But he was not bad though. He performed well in that season.
Yeah.
And who does he get in the Super Bowl? The Dallas Cowboys. But we'll talk about that. But anyway, so the New York game happens, and then they end up going with Roger Staubach. Hang on, let me pull this back up. I got to go back over. They go with Roger Staubach, and they lose to the Saints. Think about that. They lose to the Saints.
Well, Morton started that game.
No, I'm just saying, though. Yeah. I'm just saying they go and then against New England, which is opening of Texas Stadium, and we'll talk about that here in a second. They go with Roger. They win. Then they go against Chicago, and they lose. And again, he goes back to this is the game. Okay, so everybody always remembers that there was a time in this season that the Cowboys alternated quarterbacks per snap.
Well, before you mention this, the game before the Patriot game,
The Saints game?
Well, after the Saints game was the first home game.
Yeah, the Patriot game.
At Texas
Yeah, we're going to
Stadium.
talk about that here in a second.
Okay,
We're talking about that in a second.
okay.
I wanted to get to this part because the way the editing works on the video.
Right.
So everybody remembers that they traded out quarterbacks every snap. But I think everybody, including me, honestly, as a Cowboy fan who knows the season, I thought it was done more. It was only that one game.
Mm-hmm.
It was against Chicago. But as crappy as that was because of Chicago won the game, I think this is where the season just truly was in balance. And even somebody, and we talk about Bob Lilly, very like, whatever the coach wants, I'll do. But even he admitted that this was an issue.
I did not like an alternating quarterback. I know there must have been a reason that Coach Landry had, but as players don't like that. We like to have somebody over there. If he's not going to cut it, put somebody else in. But let us have somebody to lead us.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Almost like we don't even care.
Yeah.
Like just give us one. And that goes to the dynamic that, again, Landry just never quite grasped. As great as Landry is, and I still contend that he's a top 3 coach because just the fact that you create the 4-3 and then you create the offense to beat the 4-3, and a lot of the concepts that they do now started with him and Don Coryell, but a lot of it with Landry with the screen passes and things like that. He just never understood the dynamics of personal relationships. And it's so crazy to hear that because he wore his heart outside of football on a sleeve.
Yeah.
He was very Christian. He was very big about speaking about his beliefs and his faith and his religious thoughts. And he was very big on sharing that. But for whatever reason, Landry could never, and I almost pulled it and played it, but Lilly and him talk about, probably, and I don't disagree with it. A lot of it was, like you said, his age, his generation, the greatest generation. He fought in World War II. His brother died in World War II. He had a plane crash. I mean, I can understand why the emotions got turned off, but it's one of those, as great as you, I would love to go back to 1969 Tom Landry and be like, dude, if you just learn a little bit of motivation, if you show your emotion, because I do think, for as great as he was, I think that's that part that was missing for the Cowboys of the 70s. Instead of going to 5 Super Bowls and winning 2, going to 5 Super Bowls and winning 3, 4, maybe all of them. Because Chuck Noll and Terry Bradshaw never got along, but they learned how to deal with each other and work together. And as Terry Bradshaw said, Chuck Noll knew how to just motivate you.
Yeah.
That's the weakness that Landry had.
Yeah. Yeah. I even hate to say this, but the fact that the Cowboys went to 5 Super Bowls, I almost feel like that's a disappointment. I almost feel like the Cowboys.
When you look at what they did, hang on, I want to. You actually led me right to. Let's talk about that. Okay, so we talked about 66 NFC. We're just going to go ahead and call it NFC, NFL, but NFC title game loss. 67 NFL title game loss. 1970 lose a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to this stretch though. From 1970. NFC champions, lost in the Super Bowl. 71, NFC champions, won a Super Bowl. 72, NFC championship loss. 73, NFC championship loss. 74 is the one time in the 70s they missed the playoff. They still go 8-6.
But you know why it was a Well, we'll talk about it when we do the 77 team.
Yeah, because the 77 team does not happen without the 74 team not making the playoffs.
Correct.
I do think that's when Landry kind of made some changes. But anyway, 75, NFC championship loss. 76 is the first time outside of 74 that Dallas wasn't in an NFC championship game, but then in 77, NFC championship game, Super Bowl. 78, NFC championship game, lost in the Super Bowl. That is, as much as we talk about Bill Belichick, and you and I have talked about this before.
Yeah.
Bill Belichick has said it. Tom Landry is like his hero.
Yeah.
Tom Landry, he literally, everything Bill Belichick's done, he's admitted he basically shaped after Landry. And Belichick basically had Landry's career, but he won the more Super Bowls.
Mm-hmm.
Like the years that he literally finished 1 year shy of beating Landry's record of most consecutive winning seasons.
Yeah.
The difference is, and people say, well, Tom Brady. No, because Roger Staubach is a damn good quarterback. The difference is for whatever reason, Belichick, and he's not the greatest motivator, but his teams won those Super Bowls that Dallas couldn't win.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's now go back to 1971. New England Patriots. Not only was that just a big win at the moment, that is the opening of what became, and we're going to have an episode here soon. It might be this year where we're just going to talk about Texas Stadium, because I have a lot of memories of Texas Stadium, not just as a Cowboy fan, but high school football and stuff like that. But as much as we love Texas Stadium, it's kind of funny because the players didn't really think that way.
Look at Texas Stadium as being a big thing. As a matter of fact, I enjoyed the Cotton Bowl better.
They probably didn't want to air condition it, so they had the hole in the roof. I mean, there was reasons they gave for the hole in the roof, so God could watch his son coach.
It was a more sterile atmosphere. I mean, it was like there just wasn't a lot of shouting and noise.
And it was interesting how the crowd responded after a touchdown or a play. It was like, bravo, bravo. Yeah. And that was the extent of it.
All right, so that's Dwayne Thomas. Let's go ahead and now transition into that talk.
Okay.
So Dwayne Thomas was the second-year running back, rookie of the year for the league. And we'll talk about the money part. But Dwayne Thomas, you know, everybody talks about Jim Brown and Jim Brown being the counterculture, because Jim Brown was an activist before you really thought about that in sports.
Yeah.
In fact, Jim Brown was probably the very first activist of an athlete. But to me, if there's a guy that epitomizes the true counterculture, that's Dwayne Thomas. Because for good or bad, right or wrong, Dwayne Thomas was going to do things his way, whether you liked it or not. And that led to an interesting career, way too short, but very impactful, especially for the Cowboys. But you want to, for all the talk about Landry dealing with Roger Staubach and Craig Mortensen, I would love to really know, because that's one thing about Landry. He never really talked bad about his players or anything. I would really have loved to have known what Landry really thought of him, because we're talking about a generational thing. And let's be honest, we're talking about a race thing. Mm-hmm. You and I, we watched the 71 America's game before, even though we've watched it many times. But I like to do that right before some. And you could even hear like Bob Lilly and Roger Staubach not being racial, but just saying things that you think of the older white guy saying about African Americans. Am I wrong? He
you're not wrong.
He didn't do things the right way.
Yeah.
He didn't, why didn't, but so Dwayne Thomas, first off, in saying that, Bob Lilly just wax poetic about how great he was. Yeah. He literally says he thought he was going to be the next Jim Brown.
Yeah.
Watching his film, Dwayne Thomas was a violent runner, was fast. I mean, he's everything you think of as a running back in the late 60s, early 70s. Mm-hmm. But again, Dwayne Thomas, he wasn't going to do anything for free. And I'm not blaming on any of this, but I mean, he's one of those that, money was a big issue, but there's a reason why money was a big issue.
I thought he was making $16,500. He was 4 years all pro. And so,
and he's talking about Jeff.
I wonder, is this just racial thing, just a black thing? And so let me find out what the white boys are doing. So I talked to Bob, and then Bob said he's making $27,000. I said, $27,000? That's it?
But the 11 Pro Bowls I went to, about the last 8 of them, we always talked about salary. When I negotiated with Tex, and I told him, some of these defensive linemen I met are making 100. And he said, don't you know they're just pulling your leg? He said, they're just trying to make you angry at us. And, I didn't know whether to believe him or not.
So think about that. So we haven't even brought up Tex Schramm.
Right.
Tex Schramm is, for all the talk about Landry, Tex Schramm is the guy that came in and revolutionized scouting. And when I mean that, he truly revolutionized scouting. They were using computers before anybody else. They were drafting Olympic runners like Bob Hayes, basketball players like Cornell Green. They didn't just look for the normal. But Tex Schramm also was very infamous and notorious and famous for not paying his players. And in that episode, they talk about, and it's brilliant, they basically would underpay Staubach and Lilly and lean on them about, hey, y'all are the leaders of the team. We want to win. Yeah. And then they would go to the other players and be like, hey, we can't pay you more than Staubach and Lilly. But Dwayne Thomas was one of the first ones that really called out Tex Schramm. I mean, he says like he did not have a good, like there's no love lost when they talk about that. Yeah. But again, as a fan, that's part of why the Cowboys worked, was because of that. it's brilliant as a fan, but for these people making career living, I mean, think about that. And I joked earlier when we were watching this, like, at times Bob Lilly kind of come off as a rube on some of this, like taking Tex Schramm's word for that. And that's where Dwayne Thomas was different. He wouldn't take their words for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how the Tex Schramm was able to get away with underpaying his.
There was no salary cap.
There was no salary cap. I mean, I'm just shocked that. I mean, I guess since I was born in the '80s, grew up during the tech age, I would just think that at some point in the '70s, these players would be talking to each other and realize, oh wait, you make this much, you make this much,
yeah.
And I just don't see like what's the loyalty to a team when there's no. You can just leave, like once your contract's up, you can just go make the money you want somewhere else. I mean, maybe it was a family thing, maybe like,
but you couldn't back then. So back then, there in baseball, it was called the reserve clause, and this was how it was in all sports. So basically, the every contract you signed, if you signed a year contract, the club had an option to pick up that contract the next year. You didn't get to go to free agency. So if Bob Lilly, if you were underpaid, you were like, your only choice was just to not play.
Yeah.
That's why the World Football League had a moment because they were the owners of the World Football League were like, we'll pay you what we feel you're worth. Of course, how did that work out? They all went bankrupt. Yeah. But yeah, that's why, because you just couldn't leave. If your contract ended and Dallas was like, okay, let's say Bob Lilly went to Tex Schramm and said, I'm not going to play next year if you don't pay me. Tex Schramm's all right, well, fine. We're gonna re-up you anyway. If you don't play, you don't get paid, and you can't go to another team.
It'll be a good discussion point for another podcast. How the World Football League kind of affected the NFL landscape in the late 70s.
Well, yeah, it basically led to eventually the late 80s having what was the first called Plan B free agency.
Oh, yeah.
Which is where Cowboys got like Jay Novacek and stuff. But yeah, it wasn't just I'll let my contract run out, because the Cowboys could just re-up you and keep re-upping you. And since there was no salary cap and they weren't paying you a lot, okay, we'd rather pay Bob Lilly $27,000 not to play than let him go somewhere else and play. And you knew Bob Lilly, because he loved football, wasn't going to not play. So at the end of the day, what's he going to do? He's going to take the $27,000 and he's going to play. All right, I do want to go back to, because we kind of got out of sequence, but we want to talk about the every other play thing that they did against Chicago Bears. Yeah, hang on.
Against the Bears, I'm going to alternate plays. And, Craig and I kind of looked at each other and said, I just hear, what was that? I mean, I hate the question. Coach Landry is, again, he's not perfect. He's a little quirky at times. And that didn't make any sense. That just showed the fact that he still hadn't understood that the team was a bit divided at quarterback. I knew when he said I was a starting quarterback that I wouldn't be pulled.
The starter after this game.
I mean, it was a whole different feeling. When he announced I was a starting quarterback, he was going to stick with me.
Love those Cowboy Blues right there.
This was my season now. This was my team. Played hard, and he was very smart. Dwayne rarely
had memories with those blue jerseys.
Oh, whatever. You didn't even grow up in that era where the Blues were considered bad. Like, what bad loss in the 90s when the Cowboys were wearing blue?
Eagles.
They weren't wearing blue. They were wearing those weird double stars. Those don't count as the blue.
I'm thinking that game. They were wearing blue jerseys.
They were wearing the blue star, the double stars. That's not really the Blues. That's what I'm saying. That's not really the Blues. All right. So anyway, so that's the regular season. Now let's go into the playoffs for the 1971 season. As of course, Dallas is in the playoffs. On the NFC side, it's Dallas, Washington, Minnesota, and San Francisco. Again, back then, only one wild card. And this was also before, I know you've been wanting to say this because this is something that you love to mention. This was before the current system of best team gets the home field. Back then, they just alternated. That's just so weird to me. That's just, they alternated.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the 72 season, the following season, the undefeated Miami Dolphins had to go to Pittsburgh for the AFC title game. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. There must have been I tried looking this up. I couldn't find an actual reason why this rule is in place, but the despite that, they got it right in 75.
I think it's one of those things they just didn't think of. You just didn't think of, hey, the best team, the best record probably needs to be the home field.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, it didn't happen, but just think what would have happened if I
thought about that.
If the Steelers would have upset the Dolphins and killed an undefeated season simply because the game was being played in Pittsburgh, where it could have been 20 degree, anything like that.
Well, I mean, think about this, like the AFC playoffs in 71, the Chiefs actually had the number 1 seed in 71. They would have played the Colts, I believe. Yeah, because it was just divisional round, so it was only 4 teams. So the Chiefs would have played the Colts in Kansas City, and then the Browns would have went to Miami. That could have changed everything. And then going to the NFC, Dallas and Minnesota had the same record. I think Minnesota had the 1 seed. So Dallas would have played the 49ers, not in the NFC title game, but in the divisional round.
Yeah.
And then Minnesota would have hosted the Redskins. So, I mean, that you don't know what would have happened. Maybe.
No, I think you're 100% right on that.
Yeah. Maybe the Dolphins don't make it out. Maybe the Cowboys lose to the 49ers.
Yeah.
We just don't know what's going to happen. So,
all right. So in the first round of the playoffs outside of Dallas, San Francisco does beat Washington 24-20. I think a little bit of an upset, even though Washington was the wild card.
They had the better record.
I think they were the better team. Yeah. Over in the AFC, Baltimore shuts down Cleveland 20-3. And then Miami and Kansas City play. I think if anybody that knows football and knows the 70s, for all the talk of the Dallas Cowboys and them winning the Super Bowl, I think the most iconic game is Miami versus Kansas City, because that game went forever.
Yeah, it ended up being the longest game ever played. And Miami won on Gary Gepremian's game-winning field goal in the second overtime. It was also kind of symbolic in the sense that this is kind of like the last hurrah of that 60s and 70s Chiefs team.
That's a really good point that we forget about. You want to talk about teams that won a Super Bowl, but you kind of felt like they left a couple on the table. Kansas City is definitely one of those.
Yeah, I mean, they were the first AFL champions in the Super Bowl. And, there's a lot of, hey, Hank Stram, forever to this day.
You love this.
I still annoy you to this day, but you know what? You put up with it.
Because I loved it too. Yeah. I'll admit. What is it?
And he uses the word wrong, but it's still iconic. So we still say.
How does he use the wrong word?
Matriculate.
Yeah.
It actually means to graduate.
Yes, it is. Well, that's what he's saying. Graduate down the field.
Well, for anyone listening, it means to graduate to college.
Yes. All right. So let's go ahead and now get into the Cowboys and the Vikings.
Yeah.
The 71 season, dude, I for all the talk about it, damn it, if they didn't almost lose a game against a team that outside of, Minnesota's inept offense, and if this game is literally what led to Minnesota going, okay, we need to get better in offense, and they reacquire Fran Tarkenton, who they had before, and then he had played for the Giants. But Minnesota, by all accounts, dominated this game offensively. They outgained Dallas, 311 yards to 225 yards. Dallas rushed for 98 yards, but it took 40 carries.
Yeah.
10 of 14 for 99 yards. Again, dude, different era. If you can't, in today's world, you can't have a game like Roger Staubach did and survive as quarterback. I mean, we even think, you look at Dak Prescott, who did not have a great game against San Francisco, and look at how much he gets tore to shreds.
Yeah.
If Dallas loses this game, again, we go back to, I don't know if Landry survives. I don't know if Roger Staubach survives. He was 10 of 14, but only for 99 yards. But that defense, and even though Minnesota had gained some yards, at the end of the day, that turnover, aggressive defense is what won that game.
What the irony is, Minnesota had the best defensive football in 71.
Yes, it's stat-wise, you're right.
As much as I love the Cowboys' stacked defense.
But you could also make the point that their defense, it also helped that where they were in a weaker division.
Yeah, they were in a weaker division.
But that people purple eater defense.
Yeah.
That was at the. I mean, as we talk about Alan Page, MVP, Jim Marshall. It's funny because people thought Jim Marshall was on the downside of his career, and he had a bounce back year that year.
Yeah. Hey, the all-time NFL interception leader, Paul Krause.
Yes,
on that team.
I always forget he ended up over in Minnesota. I forgot about that.
But was he more of a Lion player?
Dolphin too. I thought
Dolphin. Okay,
I thought it was Dolphins. Anyway, but Dallas. But I'll tell you what, this game did something though for Dallas.
Yeah.
Because Dallas did something that they weren't known for, and that's when crap was going wrong, they found a way to win.
Well,
because that's not what Dallas did. And again, that's why you're called next year's champions. It's not because you lose games. It's because when things go bad, you don't know how to respond. Dallas knew how to respond in that game. And so as dangerous as that game could have been to the legacy, I think this game is what finally got Dallas to go, okay, even when we don't play our best, we can win a game that matters.
Yeah. Same thing. The current Cowboy crop needs to start learning. They turned 5 turnovers into 13 points, and that ended up being the difference in this game. To me, Dallas was the better team. They didn't play like it in this game.
Well, this goes back to, again, what we were talking about. There's no way that game should have been in Minnesota.
I
mean, seriously, that game should have been in Texas Stadium.
Well, they should not have played in the divisional round. Let's just back up even further. There's no reason they should have even played. It's just the way the playoff format was structured.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so.
But yeah, so anyway, so Dallas wins that. So then so going into the next round, you have Dallas versus San Francisco. That game is at Texas Stadium.
Yeah.
And then Miami versus Baltimore. That game's at the Orange Bowl. Mm-hmm. Now, for some people that might think, well, maybe Miami lost to Dallas because of that Kansas City game, because of how long it was. You can't really say that because they shut out Baltimore the next week.
Yeah. Going back to what you were saying about quarterbacks not throwing much during the game. That AFC title game between the Dolphins and the Colts, Bob Greasy only completed 4 passes in that whole game.
That's crazy.
And I think in the Super Bowl 2 years later when Miami played Minnesota, I think Bob Greasy was like 6 for 7 in that Super Bowl. So that the 73 team for the Dolphins is considered better than the 72. But
and we'll talk about that here as we finish up.
I was going to say just one more thing about
go ahead.
The AFC title game in 71. That was Don Shula's revenge game, essentially, because he got fired from Baltimore.
Well, he didn't get fired. Now, you said it earlier. He didn't really get fired.
I thought he got fired.
No, he left Baltimore for Miami.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, he didn't get fired. Miami, had fired George Wilson, I think it was. I can't remember the name of the coach.
That was a good coach for. Well, go ahead, keep talking.
But anyway, yeah. So you had said that earlier, but no, he didn't get fired. He just left. He wanted to. I think if I remember correctly, it was money and control. I think Miami was willing to give him the keys to the car.
They were,
and the Colts were more of the old we build your team and you coach it. So anyway, so they beat Baltimore, so they're going to the Super Bowl. And then San Francisco versus Dallas, the very first game at very first playoff game at Texas Stadium. Mm-hmm. And while the offense still wasn't amazing, the defense was absolutely dominating. And again, this defense had one of the best runs to a Super Bowl that you've seen. They gave up 1 touchdown in 3 playoff games.
That is crazy.
Yeah, and against good. Now Minnesota's offense, you can make a case, but San Francisco was a good offense.
Yeah, John Brody, right?
Yeah, he was the quarterback in that game. They held him to 14 of 30 for 184 yards, 3 interceptions, and no touchdowns. Mm-hmm. Again, though, Roger Staubach, we think of him now, 9 of 18 for 103 yards, no touchdowns, but no interceptions.
Yeah.
What won this game, and we too, but really what made Dallas's offense so good is you couldn't key in on anybody. Walt Garrison, 52 yards. Dwayne Thomas, 55 yards. Calvin Hill, 21 yards. Roger Staubach ran for 55 yards. Receiving wise, the leading receiver was Billy Truax at 42 yards and 2 completions. But when your defense is playing as good as it is and you're getting 6 sacks, I'm sorry, getting sacks 6 times. I thought they had 6 sacks. Wow. Again, this is why I say this team is just so different than the rest of the 70s team, because when you think of the Cowboys and Landry, the Doomsday Defense is there, but you think of that shotgun offense.
Yeah.
Diversified, 7 guys, Staubach throwing for 250, 2 running backs at 80 yards.
Yeah.
But this team, until the Super Bowl in the playoffs, it was the defense. The defense legitimately carried the offense.
And it was one of the best offensive lines of football, too. And Roger Staubach still got sacked 6 times. But that might be more so because of how Staubach played.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Part of that could have been how he played and how aggressive he was running the ball. And as great as that is, even in today's world, you run yourself into sacks.
Yeah.
But I also think you got to remember, this is the first full time that Rodgers truly starting as a quarterback.
Yeah.
Full time. He doesn't have to worry about that. He's still learning the NFL game.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is that they made the plays when they needed to. The crazy thing is this game was kind of like, me and my dad were talking about that. My dad, of course, watched it, and Cowboys scored in the second quarter. Cowboys scored in the fourth quarter. It was close in the score because Dallas couldn't score a lot. But Dad said from his memory, he never felt like they were in trouble. Like he never felt that they were going to lose because he said you realized early on that San Francisco just could not move the ball against the Dallas Cowboys. So that puts Dallas back into the Super Bowl, back-to-back years.
Okay.
I was asking Dad again because he's my reference, and I was trying to look online too. But
he's your pro football reference.
Yeah, he's my pro football reference. I tried to look online and what other people said, like who was the favorite? Who was? And he said, everybody still because Dallas had been back the year before, and because Dallas was, they were close to being the team, and they were next year's champion. He said it was, he goes, you kind of felt that Dallas was going to win the game, but he said, you still were afraid of that running game of the Miami Dolphins. And let's kind of talk about the Miami Dolphins because you talked about how they didn't throw the ball a ton, and we can talk about all the bevy of backs that Dallas had. But man, the Dolphins of that day, Jim Kick, Larry Zonka, and Mercury Morris, on top of Paul Warfield, who a lot of people think Paul Warfield was a lot like Lance Allworth, like he came over the Dolphins and he didn't really do a lot, but that's not true. Warfield was there for 4 years. Lance Allworth was really there for only a year and a half. He had 600 yards. In fact, in 71, he had 996 yards and 11 touchdowns. So this goes back to what you talk about, that Dallas secondary. And that Dallas secondary was key in that game because they never allowed Warfield to stretch the field, and that forced the Dolphins to be even more run heavy. And in the game, the Dolphins had 10 first downs. They only ran for 80 yards on 20 carries. They threw for 134 yards. Bob Greasy was 12 of 23, 134 yards, 1 interception, 1 sack. Jim Kick, 40 yards. Larry Zonka, 40 yards. And I guess Mercury Morris must have been hurt. I never actually paid attention to that. But they held Paul Warfield to 4 catches, 39 yards. And that right there is where the game was won. That and also Roger Staubach. This was the game that you saw what Roger Staubach could be. He didn't throw for a ton of yards, but he had 12 attempts. I'm sorry, 19 attempts, 12 completions, and 2 touchdowns. And I think that's the game where you realize what Roger Staubach could be.
Yeah, it was more of an efficient game, but I mean, he didn't do anything.
But I mean, that's what you think of Roy. In my opinion, when you think of Roger Staubach, you think of the efficiency.
Yeah, and in a sense, yeah. But I think when a lot of people think about Staubach, just from my point of view, they think about it more as mid to late 70s, where he was more of a playmaker. Leader of the shotgun offense.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Good point.
But this now, to a better extent, this is like Terry Bradshaw was more of a game manager back in his earlier career with the Steelers. I would say Roger Staubach kind of falls in line there, but I think he was still more of a playmaker than Bradshaw was in the beginning of his career with the Steelers.
Well, and saying all that about the offense, at the end of the day, the iconic play, and this was the iconic play, in my opinion, in the Super Bowl, probably until the Lynn Swann bobble catch against Dallas.
Yeah.
The most, the play that when I think of the Super Bowl, it all comes back down to the great Bob Lilly
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, when you see that, I mean, that right there, just Bob Lilly chasing Bob Greasy down the field and finally getting that sack. If you want to talk about one play that epitomizes one guy's career, it's Bob Lilly. Yeah. He didn't get him the first time. He didn't get him the second time. He didn't even get him the third time. But finally, that fourth time, Greasy turns right into him. And Bob Lilly is able to get the sack. And I pointed out to you earlier when we were watching this, and we'll talk about it here in a second, like what it meant for the Cowboys to win. But to see Bob Lilly's face afterwards in that locker room, I was kind of sad because you didn't see celebration. You saw relief.
Yeah.
Like, and you and I talked about, you hear Troy Aikman talk about that 95 Super Bowl. Like he even admits like that, he didn't celebrate.
Yeah.
It was relief. That's sad. And it's sad because it's expectations. And you and I talk about how fair is that? How fair are those type of expectations? To where you win your first and only Super Bowl, you win the first championship for your franchise. Bob Lilly was for all the talk about Roger Staubach. And again, this is why the 71 team and the 77 team are different. As you said, when you think of 77, you think of Roger Staubach, you think of the shotgun, you think of Tony Dorsett, Drew Pearson, Tony Hill. You thought the Cowboys in 1971, it was Bob Lilly and only Bob Lilly.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the face of the franchise. And for him and he was happy, but you can see, he says it in the documentary, but you can even see it he's not happy. He's just relieved.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, that's one of those weird things for me. Like that just kind of sucks. Like you just can't enjoy it.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I mean, if the Cowboys were known for anything else outside of Bob Lilly, might have been Bob Hayes, just because of his
just because of the speed. Yeah, but like personality wise,
Bob Lilly is Mr. Cowboy.
Yeah,
he had that iconic moment we talked about where he tossed his helmet 50 yards after the loss to the Colts.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's very sad. I mean, you did see him smile a couple times. I think he could actually. I think he was probably looking forward to actually sleeping. A whole night for the first time in a couple of years. It's a very, like you said, it's a very sad feeling to have. But relief can be its own happiness in a sense. I don't want to explain it better than that.
I agree. That's a good way to describe it.
I just think he was on edge and always thinking about the worst case scenario because of his life experiences as a football player. That, you know, no matter how good your team was, at some point it was just going to backfire and they were just going to lose.
Well, you know, and we didn't even really talk about this, and I thought about it, and you know, maybe one day when we talk about, like, you know, what it means, you know, as a Cowboy and everything, you look at what Bob Lilly went through, and then you think of Don Meredith, who literally quit because the pressure just got to him.
Yeah.
And just he couldn't. He admitted he just could not handle him and Landry.
Yeah.
He couldn't handle the big losses. He was having ulcers and stuff, and that's one of those where you start to go, man. When you think about, like, just it's a game.
Well, you know, football wasn't even the number one sport at this point in
not
time.
that you're good point.
Baseball was still the number one sport in America. You know, it wasn't until like the later 70s.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Especially in the 80s,
yeah,
when the pro football overtook baseball.
All right, so this is what they have to say about winning that big one.
When we finally won it, and it was just like being free. I don't know, you know, I mean, I've never felt that way before, that you just felt like you could pretty near fly.
It's a sense of accomplishment that can't, like, I haven't had anything to replace it yet.
We were 4-3, and all of a sudden we were Super Bowl champions.
think this now takes the onus off that we can't win the big one anymore?
I would think so. Well, if it isn't, I don't know how you dispel it. I'll tell you that. If that won't do it.
That was a feeling that you can't buy. You couldn't spend $100 million and buy that feeling. No way.
Here's that video.
Made me feel wonderful, and it was so wonderful. I just could not believe we finally did it. We finally did it.
Hey, Jimmy Brown.
I mean, that's just. I mean, it's wonderful, and I go back to, and you know, I'm a Cowboy fan, so I hated it. But the closest thing I have to that, is Steve Young winning the Super Bowl. Yes, winning the Super Bowl against San Diego. After they cheated Dallas and paid the officials. But no, winning that Super Bowl, and he's celebrating, but the first thing he is thinking is, get the monkey off my back.
Yeah.
You know, that's just, again, I go back to, you know, we all love this. I mean, you know, we get paid to talk sports, and sports is important in our life. Yeah. But man, when you get to the point where you can't even enjoy the victory because the pressure, and it's all fake. It's all pressure to win in sports is manufactured. It's not real world. Yeah. Nobody, you know, I guess some people die because they get drunk and shoot each other and stupid crap like that. But in the real world of life, sports does, you know, it shouldn't matter that much. As I say that, as we have a podcast that we're talking, but you know my point on that. I mean, when you can't even enjoy your way, and it's the same thing with us as Cowboy fans. Yeah. Well, you know, you and I talked about this before. I always joke that I was fine until 2012. The Texas Rangers broke me because they get to one strike, one out, and they don't. And since that time, before then, twice. Shut up. But you know, I get something about that change. But now, sometimes it's hard for me to watch a playoff game. Yeah, because it's not even about winning. Like when Dallas beat Tampa Bay this year in the first round. There was no, as a fan, it was just more relief. Yeah. It was just, oh man, one more week. We don't have to hear about, and then of course, San Francisco happened. Yeah. And so it's just crazy to think that, you know, that's how it goes. But anyway, my last question to you, since we're doing all 5 Super Bowl teams this year. Okay. Where do you, ranking the teams, where do you rank this one? Third.
I would rank them.
No. Just give me that one. Don't rank the other ones. That's the whole part of this. I still would have them ranked 5th. Okay. I have a feeling I know. Well, no, you know what? I'd have them ranked 4th. Okay. Because I kind of know where your last one is to mine too. I think everybody knows which one is the last one, and it's sad because that's still a talented team. But yeah, I would rank it. I still think other teams were still not better than this one, but more established, if that makes sense.
I mean, talent-wise, it's really hard for me to say this team. Talent-wise, I would say this is probably the best.
Yes, but
think about top to bottom.
No, you're right.
We've already talked about the defense, but the offense.
We didn't really talk about the offense, but the offense was still trying to figure itself out. They didn't really have a stud wide receiver. Bob Hayes was at the end of his career.
He was, yeah.
Their running game was great, but it was by a committee. But also, and this goes back to the frustration of, I think that at this point in the league, this team was overly talented compared to everybody else, where other Super Bowl winners had teams that they had bigger mountains they had to climb. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah. And so I think who you play.
My number one team is going to fall in line with what you just said.
Yeah. And that's why I figure we'd kind of have about the same ones. But anyway, that is going to do it for this first look back at the Cowboys Super Bowl championship teams. Go ahead.
Mercury Motors was more of a special teamer in 71.
That's right. It was 72 or 73 where he got. In fact, I remember that from America. They say that was the difference. Getting him the ball more, that outside speed, you know. But anyway, that's the look back at the first Super Bowl. The next one next month that we will do will be, of course, the 177. They beat the Denver Broncos 27-10. We'll do the same thing. We'll talk about the whole season of the NFL. This has been fun, but that one's going to be fun because to me is the high-flying NFL. Yeah, I've told you that many times. The late 70s is my favorite era, that in the 80s. I love the 90s Cowboys, but just when I think of football, I think of the late 70s, Doomsday 2, Roger Staubach, all that fun stuff. And so we do appreciate you joining us. If you haven't looked, we're also doing a league season 2 retrospective. That's either up now or will be up as this comes out. We do appreciate Frisco Bar and Grill. Want to remind you, you can find us, our podcast, outdrinkthecoverage.com. Find us on YouTube if you're seeing this somewhere else, at L4 Media. Email us, odtcnfl@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter, at OutDrinkU. Until next time, he's intern Noe. I'm Terry Bennett. This has been a very special Outdrink the Coverage.